Vanishing points, where the asphalt ends and nightmares begin. Welcome, my fellow nightcrawlers, to a place where the lines blur between reality and the abyss. Here on this channel, we feast on fear, we dissect the darkness, and we revel in the unknown. Tonight, we're taking a detour, a chilling journey down roads that twist not through mountains or forests, but through the very fabric of our fears. 3 tales, each more unsettling than the last, each a chilling reminder that sometimes the road less traveled leads to nowhere. So dim the lights, lock your doors, and let the unsettling whispers of these stories seep into your soul. Imagine this. You're cruising down a desolate highway, the kind where the silence is heavier than the air itself. The only sound is the hum of your engine and the occasional crackle of your radio, struggling to catch a signal. You check your map, still on course, but something feels wrong. The familiar landmarks, the ones you swore you passed just moments ago, are gone, replaced by an endless stretch of asphalt as if the road itself is swallowing you whole. This is the terrifying reality that befell a young couple driving through the heartland on what should have been a routine road trip. They were chasing the sunset, chasing a fresh start, oblivious to the fact that they were driving straight into a nightmare. The highway stretched before them, a ribbon of grey against the dying light. They had been driving for hours, the silence broken only by their laughter and the shared anticipation of their new life together. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the road, the laughter died down, replaced by an unspoken unease. The once familiar road signs, the reassuring markers of civilization, became scarce, then vanished altogether. They tried to turn back, their carefree adventure suddenly replaced with a gnawing sense of dread. But every turn led them back to the same desolate stretch of highway. It was as if the road itself was toying with them, a predator herding its prey. The world outside their windows grew stranger. The familiar landscape of rolling hills and distant farmhouses was replaced by an alien terrain of twisted trees and silent, watchful woods. The air grew thick with an unnatural stillness, a silence so profound that it felt like a physical presence. Panic set in. Their laughter was replaced by frantic whispers, their excitement by the cold grip of fear. They were lost, utterly and terrifyingly lost. The highway, once a symbol of freedom and possibility, had become their prison, a desolate stage for their worst nightmares to unfold. Days bled into nights, marked only by the rising and setting of the sun. Their supplies dwindled, their hope along with them. The highway, their endless, inescapable prison, stretched on, a testament to their isolation. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the landscape shifted again. The oppressive silence was broken by the faintest sound, a distant hum that grew steadily louder. Deep in the Scottish Highlands, where the mountains cast long shadows and ancient secrets whisper on the wind, lies a path shrouded in mist and legend. They call it the Phantom Path, a winding trail that appears only at night, bathed in the eerie glow of the moon. Locals warn travelers to steer clear, to stick to the well-lit roads and ignore the siren call of the path. But some, drawn by curiosity or a thirst for the unknown, choose to ignore the warnings. They step onto the path, lured by its ethereal beauty, unaware of the darkness that awaits them. One such soul was a young photographer, drawn to the highlands by tales of its haunting beauty and the allure of capturing the legendary path on film. He had heard the whispers, the chilling stories of those who had dared to follow the path and were never seen again. But he dismissed them as mere superstition, the ramblings of a community steeped in folklore. Armed with his camera and a sense of reckless abandon, he ventured into the night, determined to unravel the mystery of the Phantom Path. As the last sliver of sunlight faded behind the peaks, casting the world in shades of grey and black, he found it. A narrow path, barely visible beneath a blanket of mist, snaked its way through the ancient forest. It beckoned him forward, promising secrets and wonders unseen by ordinary eyes. He stepped onto the path, the air growing colder, the silence heavier with each step. The familiar sounds of the night, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, were replaced by an unsettling stillness. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, watching his every move. The path led him deeper into the heart of the highlands, the trees growing denser, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, trying to bar his way. He pressed on, his heart pounding in his chest, a mixture of fear and exhilaration coursing through his veins. And then he saw it. Nestled in a valley, shrouded in mist and bathed in the pale light of the moon, lay a village. It was a scene straight out of a fairy tale, with quaint cottages, their windows glowing with warm, inviting light. But something felt wrong. An unnatural stillness hung over the village, a silence that spoke of emptiness. He approached cautiously, his every instinct screaming at him to turn back, but the photographer in him, drawn to the strange and the beautiful, urged him forward. He stepped into the village, his footfalls echoing through the empty streets. The cottages stood eerily silent, their windows dark and lifeless. The warm, inviting glow he had seen from afar was gone, replaced by a chilling emptiness. He called out, his voice echoing off the stone walls, but there was no answer. The village was deserted, a ghost town frozen in time. He wandered through the empty streets, a sense of dread settling over him like a shroud. It was as if the village had been abandoned in haste, its inhabitants vanishing without a trace. The silence was broken only by the sound of his own footsteps and the beating of his own heart. He stumbled upon the village square, drawn by a faint light flickering in the distance. There, in the center of the square, stood a lone lamppost, its gaslight flickering weakly, casting dancing shadows on the surrounding buildings. And beneath the lamppost he saw them, figures shrouded in mist, their forms indistinct, their faces hidden in the shadows. They stood motionless, watching him with an unnerving intensity. He raised his camera, his finger trembling on the shutter release. He had to capture this bizarre and unsettling scene, but as he looked through the lens, his blood ran cold. Chapter 3, The Endless Road. They say that time is a flat circle, that everything we've ever done and will ever do, we are doing and will do again and again. But for some, that repetition, that endless cycle, takes on a more literal and far more terrifying form. This is the story of the endless road, a stretch of asphalt that traps its victims in a loop, a repeating nightmare from which there is no escape. It starts subtly, a nagging sense of familiarity, a feeling that you've been here before. You dismiss it as déjà vu, a trick of the mind, but the feeling persists, growing stronger with each passing mile. A truck driver, a man who made his living navigating the lonely highways of America, found himself on just such a road. It began on a night like any other. He was hauling a load of cargo, the engine of his rig a familiar rumble in the darkness. The highway stretched before him, a seemingly endless ribbon of asphalt beneath a star-studded sky. He had been driving for hours, the monotony broken only by the occasional chatter on his CB radio. But as the night wore on, a strange feeling washed over him. The landscape seemed oddly familiar, the pattern of the trees, the shape of the hills. He shrugged it off, attributing it to fatigue, the long hours blurring his senses. Then he saw it, a diner perched on the side of the road, its neon sign a beacon in the darkness. He could have sworn he had stopped there before, years ago, for a cup of coffee and a slice of pie. He pulled off the highway, his curiosity piqued. He stepped out of his truck, the air thick with the smell of pine and damp earth. The diner looked exactly as he remembered it, right down to the chipped paint on the door and the faded Coca-Cola sign in the window. He pushed open the door, a bell chiming overhead, announcing his arrival. The diner was empty, save for a lone waitress wiping down the counter. She looked up as he entered, her eyes widening in recognition. "You're back," she said, her voice a low murmur, barely audible above the hum of the fluorescent lights. He frowned, confused. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" he asked, his voice rough from the long drive. The waitress smiled sadly. "You always say that," she replied, her eyes holding a strange mixture of pity and resignation. He tried to shake off the uneasy feeling that was creeping over him, the sense that something was deeply, terribly wrong. He ordered a cup of coffee and a slice of pie, hoping to clear his head. As he ate, he tried to engage the waitress in conversation, to make sense of her cryptic words. But her responses were always the same, vague and unsettling. hinting at a shared history that he couldn't quite grasp. He paid for his meal and stepped back out into the night. The air had grown colder, the silence heavier. He climbed back into his truck, eager to put as much distance between himself and the strange diner as possible. He drove through the night, the headlights of his truck cutting through the darkness. But no matter how far he drove, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was traveling in circles, that the road was leading him back to where he started. The same landmarks kept appearing, the same twisted tree, the same crumbling billboard, the same deserted rest stop. He tried different routes, turning down side roads, taking exits he had never noticed before, but it was no use. And so we find ourselves at the end of our journey, our headlights flickering on the edge of reality. These tales, these whispers of vanishing roads and phantom paths, serve as chilling reminders that sometimes the most terrifying destinations are not found on any map. They exist in the shadows, in the spaces between the known and the unknown. But fear not, fellow travelers. We face these terrors together, finding solace in the sharing of these chilling narratives. If these tales have ignited a spark of fear, a thrill of the unknown, then we've achieved our purpose. Let us know in the comments below. Have you encountered your own vanishing point, a moment where the road seemed to twist and turn against the natural order? Until next time, keep your headlights on, stay vigilant, and remember, sometimes the safest path is the one never traveled.